The sky over Alara 3 had always been serene. It was a frontier world, quiet and peaceful, far from the wars and disputes that consumed much of the galaxy. On its rolling green hills stood Haven's home, a modest orphanage built from stone and steel, where the laughter of children once echoed through wide halls. It was a place where the children of fallen soldiers found shelter, a reminder that though their parents had died in war, humanity would always protect its young. On the day the sky burned, those halls fell silent. The Coalition fleet descended without warning. They were an alliance of species who had long despised humanity's rise, jealous of Earth's resilience, fearful of its spreading influence. They wanted to break human morale, to show the galaxy that Terrans were not untouchable. And so they chose their target not for its military value, but for its cruelty. A single command, a rain of plasma fire, and in moments the orphanage was reduced to ash. 312 children. Gone. The galaxy expected humans to mourn, to weep, to plead for justice in the courts of the Galactic Council. But humanity did not weep. Humanity sharpened its blades. The broadcast spread across every human colony, every ship, every city. Images of the burning orphanage, the names of every child, the last transmissions from the terrified caretakers. A quiet fury settled over the Terran people, deeper than grief, sharper than anger. The president of the United Terran Alliance gave a single speech, her voice trembling not with sorrow but with restrained wrath. They chose to slaughter our children. They have mistaken kindness for weakness. Today we put that illusion to rest. We will not strike back once. We will not strike back twice. We will erase every hand that lit the fire. We will hunt them until nothing remains. This is not war, it is justice. And we will deliver it with relentless fury. The call went out. Entire fleets mobilized. Reserve warships, long mothballed, were refitted within weeks. Retired veterans volunteered to return to service. Shipyards doubled production, civilian industries retooled to build weapons instead of comforts. Farmers, miners, workers, everyone gave, everyone sacrificed. Humanity's unity was absolute, forged in the flames of their children's deaths. The first strikes came swiftly. Task Force Orion, led by the carrier Solar Wrath, ambushed a coalition convoy on the edge of neutral space. 30 enemy freighters and their escorts vanished into wreckage. Days later, the cruiser Hammer of Dawn bombarded a coalition outpost, leaving nothing but twisted metal. One by one, every coalition fleet that had taken part in the bombing was marked for destruction. Humanity hunted them star by star, system by system. The coalition had underestimated humanity's capacity for war. They had seen Earth's diplomats, scientists, and traders, and assumed that peace had softened them. They forgot that humanity's history was one of endless struggle, that their greatest strength was not weapons but willpower. Entire worlds fell to Terran fleets. Coalition admirals attempted counterattacks, but every time they met humans in battle they found themselves outmaneuvered, outnumbered, outfought. Humanity did not waste words. They gave no quarter. No surrender was accepted from those directly responsible for the atrocity. The galaxy watched in silence. Species who had once mocked humans as sentimental now whispered among themselves, terrified. They had seen empires fall in wars before, but never with such precision, never with such cold and merciless resolve. Humanity was not raging blindly. They struck with surgical fury, cutting away at the coalition's strength until its fleets were hollow shells and its leaders cowered behind desperate treaties. On the anniversary of the orphanage bombing, the United Terran fleet arrived in the coalition capital system. It was not an invasion, it was an execution. The orbital defenses burned within hours. The coalition fleet, battered and broken, tried to flee. Humanity pursued them without hesitation, hunting the last enemy warships across the stars. When it was over, silence reigned. The coalition that had once united to strike humanity's children was gone, its worlds shattered, its leaders executed, its people left to rebuild under the shadow of Terran law. In the ruins of Haven's home on Alara 3, a monument was built. A black stone obelisk, etched with the names of all the children who had perished. Around it were carved the words that defined humanity's response. We do not forgive. We do not forget. Harm our children, and we will answer with relentless fury. And across the stars no one doubted it. The galaxy had learned a truth that day, carved not in treaties or speeches but in fire and blood. Humanity's strength did not lie in their fleets or weapons. It lay in their bond with each other, in the unbreakable will to protect their own. The sky over Alara 3 was serene once more. The fields regrew, the winds carried laughter again as new children played in rebuilt halls. But beneath that peace remained a shadow, a warning to the galaxy. Never again would anyone dare raise a hand against humanity's innocent. Because when they did, humanity answered. And their answer was always fury. The attack was meant to send a message. The coalition fleet had gathered for months, whispering in the shadows, forging an alliance of necessity. Humanity had risen too far, too fast. The Terran colonies spread like wildfire, their technology unmatched, their fleets disciplined, their people unyielding. For too many alien powers, it was a threat too great to ignore. But direct war was costly. So they chose a symbol, a wound meant to break Terran spirit. They chose the Orphanage. On Clyros Station, a remote but thriving colony, stood the Children's Haven, a sprawling shelter built for the sons and daughters of soldiers who had fallen in humanity's long wars. It was more than an orphanage. It was a sanctuary, a place where the young were nurtured, educated, and told that though they had lost parents, they had not lost family. The Terran Alliance prided itself on never abandoning its own, and the Haven was living proof of that vow. The coalition bombarded it from orbit. A storm of plasma fire reduced the station to a drifting graveyard. Hundreds of children, teachers, and caretakers were incinerated. The attackers made no attempt to hide. They wanted humanity to know. They wanted every Terran to look upon the ashes of their children and tremble. But humanity did not tremble. Humanity ignited. Across the stars, the images spread: scorched classrooms, shattered toys, silence where laughter once lived. On Earth itself, billions watched the transmission. No speech was necessary, no call to arms. The fury was instant, universal, and absolute. Human soldiers swore an oath. For every child taken, 10 enemy worlds would burn. Factories thundered to life. Shipyards lit up like cities of fire. The reserves were emptied, ancient warships dragged from docks, refitted and reborn. Retired admirals returned to duty. Pilots who had once sworn never to fly again strapped into cockpits. Even civilians lined up, offering labor, resources, and their very lives if needed. The Terran people did not argue, did not hesitate. They moved as one. For every child, vengeance. For every drop of blood, fire. The first strike came faster than the coalition expected. Task Group Valiant emerged from slipspace above a coalition stronghold. No warning. No negotiations. Terran warships unleashed a storm of railgun fire and hypersonic missiles, ripping apart orbital stations before the enemy could react. The defenders begged for terms. Humanity gave them none. The war had begun. Coalition fleets massed to meet the humans, believing their numbers would overwhelm Terran resolve. But they found no desperate soldiers, no broken people. They found predators. Terran warships fought like wolves, coordinated, relentless. Every engagement ended with coalition ships torn apart, their survivors adrift in silence. Humanity's message was clear: there will be no mercy. In council chambers across the galaxy, other species watched with dread. The humans were not waging war as others did. They were waging judgment. They did not target civilians, but neither did they hesitate to crush governments, fleets, and armies. For every child lost, humanity unleashed destruction multiplied tenfold. Entire enemy star systems saw their military forces erased within weeks. The coalition began to fracture. Some begged for peace, claiming they had not ordered the bombing, that they had merely stood by. But to humanity there was no difference. To stand by was to condone. To join the coalition was to bear its guilt. And guilt was punished with fire. Admiral Rains, commander of the 3rd Terran Fleet, was asked once by a neutral observer if humanity would ever stop. His answer became legend. We stop when the last hand that lit that fire is ash. And not a moment sooner. Months passed. The coalition bled. Once mighty fleets dwindled into scattered remnants. Their supply lines were severed, their worlds blockaded. The humans advanced without rest, their warships like storms sweeping across the stars. The final campaign was waged not with desperation, but with grim certainty. Humanity had sworn their oath, and humanity always kept its word. At the coalition capital, a grand fleet assembled, the last hope of resistance. Thousands of ships filled the void, a desperate wall of firepower. They expected a siege, perhaps negotiation. What they received was annihilation. The Terran Armada emerged, titanic in size, engines burning like suns. At its center was the dreadnought Eternal Resolve, its hull etched with the names of every child lost in the bombing. Its cannons fired first, a barrage that shattered enemy lines in minutes. The battle was not a contest. It was an execution. Hours later, the coalition fleet was gone. Their capital world lay defenseless. Humanity did not scorch it to ashes, but they dismantled its government, toppled its leaders, and broadcast their trials across the stars. The verdict was the same for every one of them: guilty. The sentence: death. When the executions were carried out, humanity did not cheer. They did not rejoice. They stood in silence, their fury exhausted, their justice complete. In the ruins of Clyro's station, humanity built a new orphanage. Larger, stronger, indestructible. At its heart stood a monument, a towering flame of steel and stone, eternal and unyielding. On it were carved the names of every child lost, and beneath them, the words that had guided humanity's vengeance. You struck at the innocent. Now we strike at everything you hold dear. Generations later, the galaxy still remembered. Not because of the war's destruction, but because of the oath that had bound an entire species into one unbreakable will. They had learned the truth: humanity was not feared for its fleets, nor its weapons, nor its numbers. Humanity was feared because when its children were threatened, the Terran people became something greater than an army. They became guardians. And their fury was absolute. They thought humanity fragile. To the galaxy, Terrans were newcomers, young, untested, sentimental. They spoke of peace more than war, built colonies with gardens instead of fortresses, and raised their children with laughter instead of drills. Many species called them soft. Others mocked their endless compassion, their wasteful devotion to children and family. The coalition of aggressors had believed they had found the perfect weapon to shatter this fragile race: terror. And so, when their warships descended on a Terran colony, they bypassed the defenses, ignored the military posts, and struck instead at an orphanage. Hundreds of children, the last remnants of soldiers already lost, were vaporized in fire. The galaxy thought humanity would break. They were wrong. The humans did not rage blindly. They did not launch a single glorious counterattack to prove themselves. They did something far worse. They began to hunt. The first signs were subtle. A coalition patrol vanished along a border system. At first, command dismissed it as raiders or navigational error. Then a supply convoy went dark. Then a battleship squadron, armed and ready, sent a distress call mid-battle, and was never heard from again. Rumors spread quickly. Survivors spoke of Terran ships that struck without warning, disabling communications, crippling engines, tearing fleets apart with uncanny precision. Others swore the humans had weapons that could slip through shields, that they moved like ghosts through space. But the truth was far simpler and far more terrifying: humanity had shed restraint. For centuries, Terrans had trained, studied, and perfected war not because they loved it, but because history had demanded it. They were the children of a death world where survival meant mastering struggle. When the coalition struck their children, humanity reached back into that dark inheritance, and unleashed it without hesitation. The campaign became known as the Relentless Hunt. Terran fleets split into small task groups, vanishing into the void. They did not march in grand armadas. They spread out, like wolves loosed into a forest, each pack hunting alone. A convoy spotted in deep space would be gone within the hour. A fleet mustering at a staging ground would find its fuel depots destroyed, its escorts torn apart before reinforcements could arrive. No coalition ship could travel without fear. No system could sleep without terror of the shadows. The humans gave no declarations, no ultimatums, no warnings. Only silence followed by fire. Coalition admirals tried to adapt. They set traps, laying fleets in ambush. But the humans never came as expected. Instead, they struck elsewhere, dismantling infrastructure, cutting supply lines, assassinating commanders in their very flagships. Wherever the coalition prepared, they were too late. Wherever they turned, the humans were already there. Weeks turned to months, and the coalition began to collapse under the weight of fear. Entire worlds, once proud members of the Alliance, begged for neutrality, desperate to escape the Terran gaze. But humanity did not forget. To join in the bombing, to stand beside those who had, was guilt enough. The galaxy began to whisper a new name for them: the Silent Hunters. On Earth, the broadcasts were rare but always the same. A list of destroyed fleets. A list of fallen leaders. A list of systems purged of coalition forces. Humanity did not glorify its vengeance. It did not need to. The people already knew why it was done. Every name on the list was a step closer to justice for the children. Among the soldiers there was no joy in victory. Only purpose. The oath carried them forward, unyielding: we do not forgive. We do not forget. For every child lost, we will take everything. Years passed. By the third year, the coalition no longer fought to win. They fought to survive. Their fleets had dwindled to fragments, their supply routes reduced to ruins. But still humanity did not relent. The hunters pressed on. When the last coalition fleet gathered, a desperate mass of warships orbiting their central stronghold, they did not prepare for victory. They prepared to die. They knew what was coming. And still the humans arrived. The Terran Armada appeared not as a single wave but as dozens, pouring from every vector of space. Carriers unleashed swarms of fighters. Destroyers dove into enemy lines like blades. Dreadnoughts, black and silent, hammered fortresses until they cracked. The battle did not last days or weeks. It lasted hours. When it ended, nothing remained but wreckage. The coalition's capital world, its leaders, its fleets, gone. Humanity did not annihilate the civilians. They left them with the ruins of their empire, to rebuild with the memory of what they had allowed. But the guilty, the commanders, the politicians, the ones who had ordered the fire upon the orphanage, were all hunted down, dragged from hiding and judged. None were spared. When the hunt was over, the galaxy did not cheer. It watched in silence, uneasy and awed. Humanity had proven a truth no one wished to face. They were not fragile. They were patient. They were cunning. And when pushed beyond mercy, they would never stop. On the ruins of the orphanage where it had all begun, the Terran Alliance built a new monument. At its base, an inscription was carved deep into black stone. "We hunted you because you struck at our children. And we will hunt again if ever it happens once more." Every visitor to that place felt the weight of the words, as though the galaxy itself had been warned. From that day forward, no species dared harm a Terran child. Not because of treaties. Not because of diplomacy. But because everyone knew the price. To touch humanity's young was to invoke the hunt. And the hunt never ended until the last enemy was gone.